Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hello, good afternoon to you from Toronto, Aries.
Welcome to the series of authenticity and inclusivity. And this is good evening from me in UK. And thank you for joining us wherever you are from the world, whether you're watching us live or in recording. We can't see you, so appreciate if you could say hi in the chat or thumbs up, whatever which is good for you, or better still introduce yourself or any questions you might have. Just pop them in the chat and we'll come back shortly to you on your question. And hi, I'm Aries. I'm your host for today. I came from a banking background of, gosh, it's a long time, two decades. And I turned ICF, International Coaching Federation certified coach, where I support my client to embrace their authenticity and to better their executive presence, increase their confidence and effectiveness as a leader. I'm also a DI advocate where I served over 7 years in a renowned NPO in Singapore, where I drive financial professionalism in the financial industry, chairing membership, mentoring pillars, and I work with many senior leaders when I was there. And hence the topic of authenticity and inclusivity, my passions and my mission. And of course, I won't deny the interesting part of how I met Rubaica. It's probably the most interesting part because we met here in LinkedIn, haven't we?
Yes, my LinkedIn friend.
Yes. This is really an interesting platform. And I learned is if you are being authentic and you really open up and meet people, people are really to come forward and meet you. And so through posts, we engage each other and we gradually found we have lots in common. And we're like two best friends in the world living in two different regions, right? We haven't seen each other in person yet. Hopefully soon they'll come by. And so Rubaica actually is Dr. Rubaica. I always call Rubaica because she's actually a physician by training and a psychotherapy, and a very passionate mental health advocate with over a decade's worth of experience working with diverse clientele across a range of environments, including inpatient psychiatry, outpatient addiction, university, loads of different settings she has. But I will not take away her lines. I'll leave her to tell you more about herself and why we choose the title of Falling in Love with Yourself, especially in this authentic journey of hers. And I'm going to pass the mic over and let you share with us how has your journey been authentic?
Thank you so much, Aries. Thank you for the gracious introduction. Always such a pleasure to be on these chats with you. And hello, everyone. So my name is Rubaica Fidvi, and presently I'm in Toronto, Canada. And I like to tell people that, I did start out as a physician. So I like to say that I thought that I could heal with my hands, but I found that my true passion actually lay in psychotherapy. And so it is a way of healing with your words. I also consider myself a really passionate mental health advocate. And as Aries pointed out, we did meet on LinkedIn. And I feel like this is such a wonderful platform because especially I would say in the last few years, and I would say since the time of the pandemic, it has really made the world a smaller place and helped me to connect with fellow mental health advocates like Aries. So I'm really grateful to LinkedIn for allowing us to connect like this. I also like to call myself actually a mental health warrior, because I feel like, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about my journey, it's been ups and downs, I always say it's like a roller coaster ride, right? And you have to learn to appreciate the challenges and coming out on the other side. And like we're going to talk about today, when we talk about being authentic, it is being able to stand out there, out and proud, with all your scars, your battle scars, and your imperfections and your flaws, and being able to love yourself. So when Aries asked me, what would you like to talk about? And I said, I am a diehard romantic. And I said, how about falling in love with yourself, right? So we talk about like falling in love with, people, other people, right? Those interpersonal relationships. But I think it's really hard to have healthy, genuine relationships with other people when we don't have a genuine, healthy, loving relationship with yourself. So it is really about embracing yourself in entirety, like I said, and loving all parts of yourself, right? The parts that are scarred, the parts that are flawed, the parts that are imperfect, and loving yourself for it all. So that's the reason why I kind of chose this topic, falling in love with yourself, because it's really that journey of discovering who you are and embracing that.
I'm
Quite a mouthful, Aries.
what lost to capture, but what stick in my mind was I started thinking that I heal with my hands. Then I found that no, it was not the hand, it was the word. And I was like, wow, that's beautiful. I need to put it down. And learning to appreciate challenge. I think depends on challenge and depends on individual. I think the come to mind is that fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, which we're all familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
When we are faced with challenges, we face with adversity, we face with difficulties, how do we deal with it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I think that's what you say by learn to appreciate the challenges. I think I can't remember where I've seen this, but it's actually through all these challenges and difficulties in our life, like I say, the imperfection, the scar, the flaw, and we embrace in entirely ourselves. That's where we're able to fall in love back with ourselves. It's not about falling in love with others. And I think a lot of romantic, I'm going to link this up. A lot of romantic relationships, but oh, I want this kind of person, that kind of person, whatever. And they're talking about other people. They forgot about themselves.
yep.
Whatever relationship we want to, it's not two half heart come together to make one heart. It's two whole heart coming together.
Yes. Yes.
We need
yes.
to be whole to have another whole relationship. When we are broken and we seek another relationship to make us heal, another person to make us heal, and it never worked. I think I've seen a lot. And
Yeah. And going into this with curiosity, because I feel like when we are, initiating relationships with other people, right, we always go in with an attitude of curiosity. So everything that I'm going to talk about today, it's what we do with other people, but now we're shining it inwards, right? We're turning it inwards. So one thing that and this was a question that was asked, a couple of months ago, I think it was on LinkedIn, something that you would tell your 17 or 18 year self, what would you tell yourself? And the one thing that comes to my mind is embrace your unique you, which I think fits in with our topic of today, right? Because when you're at that age, right, when you're a preteen or a teen, right, in that age, we so want to emulate others. And it is all about embracing ourselves. And I know that back in the day, when we didn't have all of this social media, there was still those comparisons and looking at other people, and I want to be like somebody else, and nowadays with social media, that has just become so much more pronounced. It's hard to sometimes love yourself because you want to be like somebody else, so that was something that I would encourage younger people. I'm in my 40s, so something that I would encourage younger people is to embrace your unique you. And I tell people this: embrace the unicorn in you. We are all unicorns.
We are all unicorns and embrace unique you. Yeah, I like that. And I do agree that a lot of time we always talk about, oh, how do we deal with other people? How do you deal with this? How do you do that? It's all about the outward. But the power comes from within. And I think with the kind of work that we do now, we realize that situation might remain. I think especially coaching, we see a lot, or even therapy, the situation remain. It's not that we go and change anybody else, but when we change inside ourselves, something happened. So called inner change, our perspective change and everything change. So all the things that we hold tight, I want to do this, I want to do that, I need to do this, why these people not listening, why they don't understand, why they don't this, whatever, it's all about that.
Yeah.
looking out on external.
The
But
lenses that you're using, right, to look at yourself. I'm a big fan of reframing and what you want your narrative to be. One of the things that was interesting when I was thinking about when, I'm very honest when I talk to people, I was very inauthentic for many, many years of my life, and when I kind of reflect, so I do a lot of reflection. So self-awareness is really big when you're talking about, finding your authentic you. As many of you might know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is really interesting. So, when you're looking at that pyramid, right? So at the base of the pyramid, you've got your physiological needs that you need to meet, like, food, shelter, basically what do you need for survival, right? And then when you move on to the next level, that's safety and security. And what Maslow says is that you need to meet these needs in order from bottom to the top, right? In order to stay motivated, right? And then from the safety and security, and this is what is interesting for me, the next set of needs tie in with social needs. So the need for love, the need for belonging. And this is going to bring me to one of the first, I call it shackles. So one of the first things that kept me shackled in my inauthentic self was my need for approval, my need to please, because I always wanted to fit in. I always wanted to find a sense of belonging, right? And so early on, I was myself. I'm talking about, in my teens, I was myself. And then people are like, no, but you need to look this way and you need to speak this way and you need to do things this way. And you're like, okay, I will be more accepted if I change myself. So it's interesting when you kind of think about it, that what was really motivating me, but was taking me away from my authentic self, was this need to feel loved and belong. And that's where the people pleasing came in. Right? You put other people's opinions ahead of yours. You put other people's needs ahead of yours, right? And so this is where you're moving away from your authentic self. So this was one thing that was interesting when I looked at Maslow's hierarchy. Now, the next set of needs goes to my second set of shackles. So we have what we call self-esteem needs. And this is where you're looking for things that bring you a sense of accomplishment. And for me, my second shackle was being tied into the need to be perfect, right? Everything I did had to be perfect, right? Otherwise it wasn't good enough, right? Very black or white thinking when you think about it. But this is also where, when we have that need for perfectionism, when we're people pleasing, we're relying so much on that external validation, not on the internal validation. Like, I'm good enough. I feel I'm good enough. I don't need that much of that external validation to feel like I belong, to feel like I'm loved, to feel accomplished enough, right? So those were like two of those shackles that really, I think it's interestingly tied in with some of those needs, as Maslow pointed out.
Lots of interesting point, and personally, I have to say that I resonate, because when you say, but new word was the word shackles. I tend to use need to please, need for approval, the sense of belonging. I think as a human being, that need is very strong, because we don't live alone. We want to belong to, we call it tribes, want to belong together, or a family, whatever. And that will make us conform. And when we conform, that means that where's the authenticity? Mm-hmm. And then the next thing, you talk about accomplishment, perfectionism. Actually, you brought in positive intelligence, because I'm trained in that. One of the big things you talk about, the saboteur, is about pleasing, about needing to please, which is approval, which is coming back to this needs that we have, and we will have that needs. It's only how much is that needs, how much it drives us. Actually, in the old day, when I talk about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, is that you need to satisfy the basic level, the psychological needs, then safety needs, love, belong, esteem, and self-actualization, right? You have to go
Right.
and then like that. But now after that, they have to look again. They say, well, it's not, it is true, you need to satisfy that, but not up to like 100%. And you need to satisfy to a certain level, and it can be simultaneously. And for me, maybe my psychological needs is only like maybe 30%. Yours must be 50% before I move to the next level. So everyone is different, and
Yep.
it comes with the personality. So all these move. But if we are all, I say, if we are honest, we all will have needs. It's only how much that comes about and how much that drive us and how much we notice. So I find interesting that you say you do a lot of reflection and self-awareness. And I want to ask you about this one, because in one of my, I can't remember, a couple months back, I did a post talking about my definition of authenticity is self-awareness plus courage. And I was like, there's so much to talk about self-awareness. To have self-aware, you need to have that introspection, you need to have that reflection, and you also need to have that reflection. It's not about I just spend time looking at myself, but I also need to be open-minded and
Yes.
listen to feedback. So the self-awareness is a huge piece. So
And the courage to do it.
Yeah, of course.
Because, it's really, you're holding that mirror up to yourself and you're like, okay, am I willing to examine this? And am I willing to be curious enough, right? To actually unravel.
Courage is a big
labels.
piece.
Yes.
So I'm going to, but before because courage is what my definition, you're talking about reflection and self-awareness, but self-awareness itself is also a big piece. I think at this point is I would really like to hear about, we talk about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and I think most of us will see that and understand we all have the needs, yet we are different. But how is your journey coming in to realize that, yeah, I'm doing all this is external, I need to look into an internal. I'm not denying my needs, I'm not denying that I psychological needs, safety needs, belonging needs, whatever, I'm not denying it, but I cannot deny who am I at the core.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just like kind of going back to what I was saying, at a young age, I started with the people pleasing, perfectionism. And the third shackle, I call these my 3 Ps. Yeah, my third shackle was getting very stuck in the past. So as life went on, my 20s and my 30s, I, as I said, it's a series of ups and downs, roller coaster ride. Like, everybody's life is a journey, right? And I realized with the past that oftentimes I would look back and I wish I was that person 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You're so in love with somebody who you were 15 or 20 years ago. So it is really kind of not accepting who you are today. That's again where I come back to, embracing who you are today. So that is again, being really stuck in the kind of person that you were 10 or 15 years ago. And then the second thing that goes with the past and being stuck in the past is, through life and the experiences that you've had, whether they're traumatic experiences or challenges, right? And that have changed you, there are feelings that crop up. And a lot of times there could be disappointments and there could be hurt and there could be shame. And because of that, we tend to kind of, you're showing the world one self and you're this other self on the inside. You're not being wholly authentic because, as I said, the inside does not coincide with who you are on the outside. And the biggest emotion, and we talk about this, is shame, right? Shame is such a big part of why a lot of us feel we can't be authentic. Because we feel like if I show people who the real who the real I is, I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to be humiliated, right? There's a sense of vulnerability, and a lot of us are uncomfortable with being vulnerable. So I feel like the past is something that shackled me as well and kept me very inauthentic. And through when I reflected back and I saw I have this people pleasing and I have this perfectionism and I have this being stuck in the past, on the surface level, it seemed like I was very high functioning, but I was miserable. I was unhappy. And I really say that with all of these shackles, I was really kind of self-destructing on the inside. And you have that. You see people like that on the surface. It looks like things are good, right? But you don't know what's going on the inside. So this was only, I would say, few years ago. I started like on my journey of authenticity and really taking a good hard look at myself. My thinking, my attitudes, my behaviors, what was serving me and what was not serving me. And what I needed to do to get rid of those shackles. So now this ties us to that self-love piece that we were talking about, Aries. Because I feel like a big part of being authentic is being able to accept who you are today, in the here and now. And I feel like when we talk about self-love and we talk about self-compassion and we talk about self-empathy, these are the bombs. This is really what's going to heal. This is really what's going to help us accept ourselves and actually fall in love with who we are.
Yeah, I think we spoke quite a bit about this, about, having the compassion and love. And I think the big part is all about acceptance. I think especially your third chakra, you say stuck in the past. When you're stuck in the past, it's about not moving forward. It's because you can't accept your present self because of what is happening in the past, whether there's a trauma or whether there's something that you just can't, you're not ready to let go yet. There's something still holding you back. But what I find interesting, you mentioned this part, is what served me versus what not served me. And I'm curious at what point of time that questions kind of come out to you. What served me, what don't serve me?
Yeah. So, the 3 Ps that I talk about that shackled me, that took me away from my authentic self, right? I also call those my happiness killers. So I just realized like a couple of years ago that I was really unhappy, and I'd been really unhappy for a while. And what did I need to do to be happy? And I'm not talking about the superficial happiness, right? The few distractions here and there that you feel happy for a bit, but then you're back to, that inauthentic self. And so I realized that in order to truly, truly be happy, I had to go back to my roots. And I had to embrace my authentic self, right? I had to examine who I was at the core. And so this is, again, where that self-love piece comes in, right? Because when we talk about self-love, it is really appreciating your entire self, right? Like really seeing yourself for who you are. And that's the reason why I like that, the image of like a warrior, because, you've gone through all of these battles and challenges and you've got scars, but instead of being ashamed, now you're standing proud with those scars, with the flaws, with the imperfections. That's okay. I am embracing my unique self. When we talk about self-compassion, it's really about showing kindness to yourself like you would to others. And, we talk about this. We're so kind to other people and we're so unkind to ourselves, right? Whether it is in our actions, whether it's the things we say to ourselves, right? But self-compassion is an essential ingredient as well. And self-empathy is really being able to observe yourself without any kind of judgment, being open-minded about yourself, right? And that's why I feel like self-love, self-compassion, and self-empathy, those are those ingredients that really help with that self-acceptance and really finding your authentic self.
I have to say something. You haven't you're not throwing a positive intelligence, but what you have said, is a little bit of that concept. And I was just explaining to some of my clients early this morning about their empathy, because they think that, empathy, I just I've been always doing this. The empathy is allowing self-empathy. Is also not letting other people, when they're not being nice to us, don't let us be triggered by they call it saboteur, as in negative emotion, not to be triggered by them. And when we do that, as in that self-empathy, we actually have no judgment. It's without judgment, being open, and the curiosity. You're talking about the positive intelligence sage power. Just go and read about it. Yeah, really. But I think it's beautiful when the thing is we practice so much on the empathy, compassion, and love we have is on other people, and we forgot to practice on ourselves. I'm guessing it's a lot of deal with upbringing. I always think there's Asian, but I know that there are other people, they have the same upbringing. We always taught that we need to be considerate of other people, need to be thoughtful. So it's all about. And
I love how you're bringing in the cultural component, because so much of the sense of accomplishment, the people pleasing also comes from a cultural context, for sure. Yeah.
So it's all a lot about, the considerate, whatever, all about that. And then when we start looking at ourselves, the first thing that comes to mind is you're self-centered, you're selfish. Authenticity, is that a good thing? You just focus on yourself. It's not about other people. But I think, time passed so fast.
Yeah.
So I really want to bring this in about the importance of when we have this authenticity, embracing ourselves with self-compassion, self-empathy, because somebody said something, you cannot, and everything that you do, if you come from the empty shell, there's nothing to give. But when we have that love, then you can pour out. So the self-compassion is important, and that will allow us to embrace our authenticity. I'm going to put a word there. It's kind of releasing the shackles that you have, right? To bring you from the past to the present. It's not about not accomplishing, but able to let go of the being perfect.
Yeah.
And you are still in that belonging, but you no longer need to seek to approve. You only want to be there, but you don't need it.
Exactly. The approval needs to come from within, more than that external validation. So, I always love, talking about strategies, because it's like, okay, we can talk about a lot of things, but what can I do to really show myself that love, right? So some of the things that I have done and I continue to do as part of my self-love routine. So firstly, we did talk about the people pleasing, right? So one of the first things that comes to my mind is comparisons. So we need to stop making comparisons with other people. I always tell people this: you need to focus on your own journey, on your own race, right? Don't look at what's going on this side. Don't look at what's going on that side. You really need to just focus on your own race. The second thing is, you don't always have to buy into the opinions of other people. And opinions are opinions. They're not facts, right? So this is something that I learned. Like, a lot of times people will say things that might be unkind. And what I've learned to tell myself is, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And that's okay. That's okay. There are going to be people that like you, and there are going to be people that don't like you. And you know what? You just want to go and find that group of people who appreciate you for being your authentic self, right? So again, as I said, not buying into the opinions of others. When we talked about the perfectionism, right? One of the first things that comes to mind is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Mistakes are okay. And you know what? Failure is an option. Failure is an option, right? And so one of the things that I actually started doing 2 years ago was, because when we're afraid of failing, we don't seek out opportunities. We don't create opportunities. But it's time to start saying yes to everything. Even if it scares the hell out of you, you want to say yes, because that is going to help you to really kind of see your own potential, to expand your comfort zone. Now, when we talk about that people pleasing, and we're talking about putting other people ahead of ourselves, it is time to start prioritizing your needs. Also, do not let people walk all over you. So sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm not going to speak up because I don't know what this other person is going to say or how they're going to, what they're going to think of me, right? So this is where don't be afraid to be visible. You have to step out of the shadows, stand tall and proud, speak your mind. The other thing that I also say is, and this was key for me, is you've got to get the toxic people out of your life. The people that are telling you to be a certain way, you've got to get rid of those people. You want to have people in your life who appreciate you for being your authentic you. I also think it's important for us to really kind of, if you're scared of something, right, to really be able to confront our fears and walk through your fears, right? Because our fears stop us from realizing our true potential. We talked about some of those emotions that come up when I talked about, the past, right? So shame, disappointment, right? Self-compassion is huge in this, because when you're compassionate to yourself, that is the best balm, honestly, to deal with feelings of shame, is to be compassionate towards yourself. And a big thing that I talk about is self-forgiveness. It is really hard to be your authentic you if you are not ready to forgive yourself. So when we talk about forgiveness, and I read this somewhere, they call it the 4 R's of self-forgiveness. So the first thing is taking responsibility, right? So for whatever has happened in your past, be willing to take responsibility for maybe the times I let myself down, the times I didn't speak up, the times I let other people be the priority instead of myself. Take responsibility for that. Expressing remorse for what has happened. Yes, I take responsibility, and you know what? I was disappointed in myself. I am disappointed that I did not step up for myself. And showing compassion to yourself, just like you would to somebody else. If they came up to you and they said, what, I feel really disappointed, how you would be a good friend to that person, you need to turn that inwards and be a good friend to yourself, right? The third part is where you make amends to yourself, and you even apologize to yourself, right? So, I'm sorry that I didn't put myself first. I apologize to myself. And the last part is what we call renewal, which is where you take lessons from the past. So this is where I'd say the past is important so far as you look back and you can take lessons from the past and apply it to make better choices in the future. So I believe those 4 R's are taking responsibility, being able to show remorse, being able to, gosh, I'm skipping on the
Make amendment to self.
Yes, restoration. We call it restoration, right? When you're able to make amends and you're able to apologize to yourself. And then the process of renewal, when you have taken those learnings from the past and you're making better choices. And when we talk about this process of, being on your authentic journey, remember, you could be taking a couple of steps forward and 2 steps backwards tomorrow, and that's okay. Be compassionate with yourself. Because, sometimes I go into my default people pleasing and my perfectionism, and I'm like, Rubaica, it's okay. It's fine. You take a step back and you say, okay, that's fine. It's good that I have that self-awareness and I can recognize those old behaviors and say, that's okay. I'm going to now do something different.
Lots of gems here. I think one of the big thing I agree is, before we go to the 4 R, is about stop comparing ourselves with others. I like to use this illustration. There are lots of mountains around. If you see this mountain is tall, you'll find another mountain that's taller. Maybe this day we don't use mountain, we use building, right? There's competition about building, right? Just keep seeing taller and taller building.
As urban people.
So there's no end to that comparison. So stop comparing. If you need to compare with yourself. Where have I traveled from last year, last month, whatever, how have I been to my current journey, rather than comparing, because we are all the unique unicorn. So how do you compare one unicorn to another unicorn? Based on what? Based on hair color, short, long? What do you base on, right? That we're so unique. I like what you say, don't buy into to the opinions of others, because not everyone is my cup of tea. You try to please everybody, you're not going to please everyone. So stick to the like-minded people, and I think that will probably kind of get rid of toxic people in your life, because they will go, and you allow yourself to make mistake and prioritizing, and not afraid to step out of the shed of your shadow. Is that what you say? Oh,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about shadow the next one, by next talk end of the month. And then conform your fear, which is about the shame and disappointment. I think a lot of people find it the hardest, and what they do is they avoid it. But when you can to do that, is like I say, the best balm. I love what you say, it's a self-compassion. I think that when people try to confront themselves, but they don't have the self-compassion, it's a disaster. You need to really love yourself first, then you can do that. And of course, your 4R: take responsibility, express remorse, restoration, and renewal. Yeah.
And one of the things I always say is, when we talk about self-love, self-compassion, that kindness that we are turning inwards, you really want to pay attention to the internal critic in your head, like that ticker tape in your head, and make sure that you have powerful affirmations, right? So I'm valued, I matter, I am loved, I make a difference, right? Because you are.
Before I end, because the topic is authenticity and inclusivity, so I would like to say, how does all this that we talk about, being authentic, embracing our core self, which is what we are doing, and including, I don't know, there's so many tips there. How does all that come together when we embrace ourselves as a person of authenticity to be part of the inclusivity?
Yeah, because I think when we're authentic, we're being honest, we're being welcoming, we're being non-judgmental, we're being genuine, we're being open-minded, and all of this ties into being more inclusive. And I think one other thing is, when you are truly, truly being authentic, you're willing to be vulnerable. Just like you and I having this conversation, Aries, we're allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. And for me, I found that when I allowed myself to be authentic, this was where you actually find freedom. You're not shackled.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And yes, this will be the end of sessions, and then see everybody in public sometime end the month on 20th. We'll talk about shadow work.
See some topics come up, right?
All right then.
Wonderful, wonderful. Take care, Aries.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.